off we went. And 400 parts later, I'm still wading through. I'm thinking, what did I do? But they had a blast.
So once it's fired, then you paint, then you fire again?
Yes. So it's not, the normal process is 2 firings. So you want to biscuit fire it the first one and then glaze fire it the second one. But there is a school of thought that says, why do I need to biscuit fire it and glaze fire it? Can't I just do 1 firing? And I have tested this theory and the pots don't look any different. But it depends what you're using it for. Like I wouldn't do that if it was a mug or something I'm going to eat out of. But people that come in and they say to me, I got to have this in a week. I'm like, put that glaze on, lady, and I'll dry it and it'll go in the kiln. And a week later they get their pot and then they go back to whatever state they're from and enjoy their pottery.
I've seen some pottery that has just the colorization. It'll have like a red at the bottom and a different color and then a lighter color at the top. How do you get the variations in color? Is that by painting? Or do you add something to the clay to give it that color?
So you can do both. You can do something called mason stains, where I would knead that into the clay, and then depending what you want to do, whether you want to throw it or roll it or hand build with it, you can do that. Or you can use something called an underglaze, and then you would paint it, and then you would build your colors.
Okay.
So underglaze is more like using watercolor. So if there's any watercolor artists in here, you would like underglaze. You can thin it with water, you can flood it, you can get the detail in there. I mean, it's lots of fun to work with. And then you would either leave it as it is, or you would put a clear coat of glaze on it. So
If you wanted to paint it, say you got it done and you wanted to do a painting or a scene on it, would you do that before you fired it?
Yes.
you can paint underglaze on greenware, which is like this. And then you can fire it, and then you can glaze it. Because the risk you have with glazing it after you've under-glazed it is that sometimes it can smudge it. So a lot of people like to paint it on the greenware. They can paint it on the biscuit and fire it again, that's no problem. You can actually fire pots 3 times. So it's not just once or twice. And there's some people that have a school of thought that you can fire it more than that too. So
Have you ever done it in an open fire pit?
I have. It was a big learning curve because we didn't take any screws out of the wood. And then we had these wonderful creations which had clumps of metal on them. I know, that was funny. But it's lots of fun. And you, with that kind of thing, you can put natural things in with you have to bisque fire the pottery first. And then you would put natural things in there, like maybe you might put pecan shells or seaweed or...
Horsehair. I've seen horsehair.
Yeah, so that's naked raccoon. So that's a little bit different, but I'll explain that in a minute now. Or you could put, I don't know, orange peels, lemons, all dried out. You would put them in the pot, you would wrap them in foil, you would stick them in the fire, lots of sawdust, wood, put it on fire and just keep adding to it. And then it's supposed to be 3 days later, well actually 1 minute, then about 8 hours, smother it. So it's lit and fired for about 6-8 hours, and then you smother it, and then you come back 3 days later if the weather's not cool. With what you were talking about, that is going back to raku firing, which is, it's like I don't know if anybody's seen raku firing on the, yeah? It's like a kiln that you lift up and off, but you can convert old kilns also, where you put a hole in the bottom and then there's a Bunsen burner, not Bunsen burner, a like weed burner that gets really high. And then you have shelves and you put your pottery with a certain glaze on it. You would then crank that baby up and it gets to 2300 degrees pretty much inside this kiln. You've got the lid shut, you've got a vent in the top, and you just about 20-30 minutes later you check it, and if that is like sweaty and kind of, you just can tell the glaze is starting to melt. You would take big tongs and using big gloves, take it out, put it in sawdust, then you would let it go. Put the lid on, it's all very exciting, let me tell you. Put the lid on, try not to get your hair on fire. And it oxidizes the glaze, and when it does that, starved of oxygen, it causes rainbows and metallics to happen on the glaze. And it's just beautiful. So what you were talking about, the naked racquer, as they call it, is you've got your bisque pot, you put it in the racquer kiln, it's got nothing on it. And you then wait till it gets to that 2300 degrees, you take your big tongs, and you've got a couple of options. You can stand it on a shelf, and then you can throw horsehair on it, human hair, feathers are really cool, and as it touches the surface of the white pot, it'll singe and leave black on it. So you'll have the imprint of a feather, you'll have the imprint of horsehair. It's incredible. Some people stand them in sawdust because then it'll give a smoky swirl going up the side. It's rather lovely. So it's lots of fun too. So, okay, let me just finish this real quick. I am nearly finished, but
No questions?
I know. So just by cupping it like this, I can bring it in. There's something called collaring, where you put your hands on it like this. You've got to be careful because it's starting to get a bit thin.
Like in a flower pot?
Put some shoulders on it. And then I want to tidy up the box. So this is when this comes in. I come in and I start trimming that shape. If I lift it up, it gets higher up on the wall. If I tilt it forward, it gets lower in there, like so. Now if I take this and put it on the side here, watch what happens to the pot. Starting to wobble. It's always a bad sign, just so you know. And then I can just run this over it. And that's it. You can put flowers in there. If I wanted to put a little lid on it now, I could. There's lots you can do.
So how do you coat it off the wheel?
So how I do it is I flood the wheel like this. I just take my wire and I wrap it around my hands, and then I put my thumbs like this, and then I just drag it through. Sometimes it's once or twice, like so, and then hand flat like this, and slide it onto my hand. Now I'm old school, and some people have back systems, which I got to tell you are really fancy. They're called back systems. So this back here actually comes off. And I could have left it, I could have run the wire through and left it on here to dry a bit more. So if I didn't want it to, like say if I was making a lidded object, lidded pot. So I don't want this to walk at all, because I'm measuring that to make sure that lid fits perfectly inside there. So what I would do is I would lift it off, I wire it through, lift it off there, and then I would just leave this dry. And once it's leather hard, I can just pick it straight off, and it's ready to be trimmed then. And then I would put another back on there, and I would throw my little bowl that's then going to be inverted to make a lid. I would take my caliper, I would measure this, I would measure the inside of what I want there to drop into there, and I would have the forming of my lid. I then could put a little knob to go on the top of the lid, separate, and join it separate. So there's so many things you can make. I really recommend it. Time.
It's 2 o'clock.
Okay, you okay if I show you a little bit more?
Sure.
Okay, so this is the earthenware
We're
clay.
all gone, that's long enough.
Or falling asleep again. Okay, so one of the earliest forms of clay making is a pinch pot. And to make a clay pinch pot, you make a ball in your hand, you take your thumb, you press in the center. Then you take your thumb and your 2 fingers, and you're going to press all the way around, like so. Now I forgot to make slip that goes with this, so I'm going to try use some that's on here. But normally we would make little pea-sized balls in a bowl, tip some water in with a paintbrush, make it so it's like gravy. And what this does is makes like glue to stick everything together. So I've got my rough shape here. I tap it on the table, and what that does is gives me a flat edge like this. Sure, I'm keeping that round shape. I then take the second piece of clay, thumb in the middle, and do exactly the same as what I did with the last one. Tap it on the table. That gives me a really nice edge here. And this tool here is a scoring tool. So it looks like a little garden rake. I would take that and I would run it all over the surface of the clay here. I would do the same with this one. And if I'd not forgotten my little bowl of slip and my paintbrush, that's what I would be doing next. So I would add slip to this. I don't know if I can do that. Let's have a look here. You can use water. They have something now called magic slip that you can make, and I think it's the recipe involves vinegar. Vinegar apparently makes a really good form of joining clay together. So what you do then is, even though it's fallen slipped, you still need to work it a little bit. So you would wiggle it in place all the way around. So it doesn't look very pretty right now. But what you would do then is take this tool here, which is called a potter's thumb, and you would now start working these 2 edges together. And you don't have to like just keep it one direction. You can go all directions. You just want that gap sealed. You want some strength to that join so that when you fire it, it's not going to crack there. You can smooth it a bit with your fingers. If you're a hands-on artist, you will just love playing. There's so many things about it that are just so wonderful. Now, because it's full of air, I could roll it on here. Anybody want to play catch? But this here even though it's the simplest form, I can make a snowman. I could add flowers all over this and use it as a decoration in my garden. I could make holes through it and make a wind chime from it. I mean, this form here is so versatile. I could make it into a cat face or a dog face and add a nose and ears and eyes. I mean, I can make it into the body of a cat and add another ball and put ears and little features on it and legs and cut it all the way around, make it a little trinket box. I mean, there's so many things I can do with that. And then before it dries, I would just poke a little hole in it, and then it's safe to go in the kiln. So
Can you carve on it and then paint it?
yes, you can. You could carve. You could carve a valley scene with mountains and trees and little bears. I mean, you could take some of these and you could press it onto the surface. You could, I've got some chickens in here. Now, personally, if I'm going to use a chicken, I really like to roll out clay, press it onto it, and then cut out the clay, and then add that onto there. But you could easily press that onto there. So it's just such a huge blank canvas. But as soon as you put things like this to it, it suddenly has personality. And there is no stopping you what you could put on here. There's so many things. You could make it into so many other things too. One of the things that people love to do right now is they got all these very fancy rolling pins out there, which may add are very expensive, but I do love them too. I didn't bring one, I forgot. But an example would be, it would have this kind of design all over it. And you would roll out your clay, and then you would take your time and you would roll that over the clay. Then they have something called forms that they call, I can't remember the exact name, what they call them, but it's basically a wooden shape that is the shape of a pot or a tray. You would take that clay and you would lay it onto that form with your rolling pin decorated side against the form. You would trim it and then let it dry a little bit, and then I have one actually here.
Oh, nice.
So that's a rolling pin that I have with bees and flowers and all that kind of thing. And this was as a form that I have at the studio. I rolled the clay out, put it on there, and then this is underglaze. So this is not fired yet because I'm still working on it. But this is the detail you can get using underglaze.